Welcome to Rational Scale Modelling. This is part 8 of Trumpeter's German 2cm self-propelled gun. Scale is 1 to 35. In this part, I'm going to be working on the engine bay, putting in some little photo etch parts and finishing off with putting the cover or the bonnet onto the actual cab unit itself. So let's jump into this and see how well I get on. To begin with, I'm making up the foot plates for the access into the cab, and this is done with photo etch, as you can see. So I'm just using my bending tool here to get the angles that I need. And you've seen me use this before, and they're very nice little bits of kit. If you haven't got one, I would recommend one. And once I've bent everything into place, it's just a simple matter of a tiny little bit of super glue in this instance to place them on. Generally, I would use a white glue, but I want to have a quicker bond on these, so I'm using the super glue. Just means when I'm painting and things, I'll have to be extra careful because they can dislodge. There's some little things to make up for the engine bay. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I'm closing up the engine itself. However, I thought I'd make them up just to show you what they're like. And these parts are just like little canisters. I don't know what they're for, but they go from just at the side of the engine and get connected by a series of pipes. And these have to be made up with the two halves are put together. Then there's a reaching bracket that goes over both to join each one up. It sounds a bit complicated, but it really isn't. Effectively, I'm just making two parts sandwiched together and it's bracketed on top. And then units painted in Revit Acrylic 09 anthracite. I should say as well, I mean, at this point I wasn't 100% sure whether I was going to close up the engine bay or not, so hence why I'm making the effort as well. But predominantly, I had it in the back of my mind that I would be closing it up. And as I said, there's a series of little pipes and that connects to these small parts onto the engine. And they're quite fiddly to do. Using my tweezers just to ease them in position. But it'll take quite a bit of work to get everything lined up. Next is the dashboard, but before I get onto that, I'm just having to place in a couple of little brackets that hold the dashboard into position. These are made up from plastic as well as photo etched. Why there's a mixture of materials, I'm not 100% sure, but the locations are on the back panel and it's quite easy to follow. The dashboard itself, you have to make it up. There's a middle section that sticks out from the main back panel. I recommend making these up first before you place them on the decal. As you can see there, I already had the decals out and ready. So once everything was setting, the decals went on just the normal way. I'm using a decal solution, which is microset, and just placing that all over the actual dashboard itself before applying the decals. Well, these decals are quite small, but it's all the dials for the dashboard. So I'm just placing on the last ones now. There's not that many to go on, but they are small and they do take quite a bit of manoeuvring to get them in position. It's best to take your time on this because this dashboard is very visible once it's inside the model. And once everything is dry, there's a back bracket that goes on this section. That's just to hold everything in place, and it forms one of the main brackets for the dashboard. I found it a bit strange that this one goes on like this, but the others go on the back or the bulk head or where the engine bay is. But you can see it going on there. You can see the gap that you're looking for. This gap is quite important because there is a cover that goes over this. So you want to make sure everything is lined up so it can fit. And while that's drying, I'm jumping over to the flatbed portion of the half track, and this is the rear bench I'm making up. So as you can see, it's just two halves sandwiched together. There is a couple of struts that go on at the bottom as well. You can see them there on the map. and there's two little location points for them to sit into. And the seat portion is painted in Revlock colour 08 matte black. The underside is just painted in the generic grey that I've been using. The Revlock colour 79 greyish blue. But in reality, you don't really have to paint the underside if you don't want to. Paint the struts because you will see them, but the underside of the bench, you're not going to see anyway. I am going to use the 79 greyish blue though, just for the dividing section of the bench. So it's just painting in a small strip to give the seats definition. And once it's dry, it's just a simple case of popping in. Again, a little bit tricky. It depends how big your hands are really, but it's better just put it in a set of tweezers. But as you can see, it keeps on flopping down. The location points are very small, and it's got to butt up against the bulkhead there. So it can cause one or two issues to fit it. Next to go on are the door panels, and I lined mine up with the flatbed framework with this to fit on. Depending on how well you put on the flatbed will detail well this fits. If you have the flaps down, it's going to be a little bit more tricky to fit this. It doesn't quite fit the angle of the bulkhead. Now, whether I've put that in the wrong position or not, but it just had to squeeze it in to make sure everything was lined up. Next is to make up the bonnet, but first of all, the first process, I should say, is making up the radiator cover. And this is actually 3 sections that you have to make this up now. I'm not sure if it's wise making up all 3 sections if you're closing it off anyway, because you only see the front of it. But like with the engine, I think it's good just to show you how it's made up. And I've used Revlock colour 08 matte black for the inner part of this, but you will not see it. For the bonnet itself, it's quite a simple process to make up. First of all, I'm placing on the radiator cover. Now the instructions say put on the side panels first, but I thought it'd be better to put on the radiator cover before these side panels. It just gives you a little bit more to line everything up. So I've set the bonnet aside to dry, and now it's time to put on the cover that goes between the dashboard and the bulkhead of the engine bay. This was a bit tricky to fit. I did have some gapping issues. Now, I'm not sure whether that was me or the kit, but I had to use a little bit of filler just to place in the gap. And then I was able then to place on the bonnet itself. This fitted beautifully. It just went on straight away. I did have to press it down quite firmly to get it to hold, but the actual location points and everything were spot on, and I didn't have any difficulty whatsoever with it. I left everything to dry overnight, and in the morning I discovered I forgot to put on the handles for the covers for the bonnet, for the side panelling. It was an easy fix. It was just made a little bit awkward because of the wheeled arch, but I got them in place. The location points for these are nicely defined, and they just went in superbly well. So it really didn't matter, but obviously this should have went on before I put on the actual bonnet itself. Moving on to the lights, and I'm using micro crystal clear here for the parts of the lights where it has the clear parts. Now, I've put a little dab in here. This will take a while to go clear. Now, I can either just leave it like this, and I'll form a film over it, or I can put in the actual clear part as well. In the end, I put the clear part on because they do have some details on the lens of the lights, which is nice to see. Cameras, it's a bit difficult to pick them up on the camera, but they're just these little circular clear parts that just sit on the front. And as I'm making these up, this is where I'll leave part 8. There's got a few of these to make up, so they take a little bit of time. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for my other builds? If you subscribe to the channel, make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you'll be kept up to date, not only with this build, but all my future builds as well, of course. Hit that like button, don't be afraid to leave a comment, and of course you can share the video. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.